I was living in Flatbush, Brooklyn at the time. I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn my entire life. But at this particular time, we were living in Flatbush, and I went to get my windows tinted on a car. And the guy, Scotty, who was tinting the windows, introduced me to a producer by the name of Howie T. He was working on a record for an artist by the name of Chub Rock. And they was working on a song called Treat 'Em Right, which is one of the biggest songs in hip hop. And I just happened to be in the room, and they asked me to come to the session in Manhattan to play keyboards on the record.
Hello, and welcome to the Foxworth Theory. I'm your host, Eugenia Foxworth. Thank you for joining us. The Foxworth Theory covers the worlds of entertainment, fashion, business, and the arts. We speak with the leaders, movers, and shakers of their field on location, allowing them to tell their stories. This week, our guest is music executive, award-winning writer-producer, and culture curator Stanley Brown. In his 30 years in the entertainment industry, Stanley has contributed to over 12 million albums nationally and 20 million sales internationally in gospel, pop, R&B, and hip-hop. While he has worked with some of the biggest names in the industry, from Salt-N-Pepa and Michelle Williams to gospel icon Shirley Caesar, Stanley manages to seek the uniqueness of musical artists with a promising talent. This segment of the Foxworth Theory is sponsored by 12-3 Productions. The film False Pretenses will be available online for streaming on Thanksgiving Day. Go to www.falsepretensesthemovie.com for more information. Stanley.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You began your career in the music industry as a session player for such outstanding performers as Salt-N-Pepa and Run-DMC. How did a young man from Brooklyn get that kind of gig?
Wow, the funny thing is I was living in Flatbush, Brooklyn at the time. I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn my entire life. But at this particular time, we were living in Flatbush, and I went to get my windows tinted on a car. And the guy, Scotty, who was tinting the windows, introduced me to a producer by the name of Howie T. He was working on a record for an artist by the name of Chub Rock. And they was working on a song called Treat 'Em Right, which is one of the biggest songs in hip hop. And I just happened to be in the room, and they asked me to come to the session in Manhattan to play keyboards on the record. I went and played keyboards on the record. Record blew up. Because of that, it spiraled down to other things. I was in another session where a guy named Spider-Man and Dr. Freeze were in attendance, and they were working on a song called I Want to Sex You Up. So they invited me to the studio to play keyboards and played on those records. And one thing happened, this Salt-N-Pepa, I met Herbie Lovebug, who was producing Salt-N-Pepa. he asked me to come over to the studio, and I'm playing records. I'm playing keyboards on all of those records, and it just from one session, one hit record to the next hit record, and then I started meeting record executives, and that is what launched the second half of my career as an A&R person.
That is absolutely amazing. You have to be in the right place at the right time.
Yes.
After paying your dues and learning your craft, your career began to spiral upward in the R&B genre, which propelled you to produce such legendary artists as Chris Williams, Keith Sweat, Morris Day. When you sat behind a board in a recording studio, what was the key factor that you looked for in your talent to produce a hit?
Well, and the funny thing is how that connected, as I mentioned earlier, working with Dr. Freeze and Spider-Man on the song I Want to Sex You Up. That movie was actually being, that song was actually being created and produced for the movie New Jack City. So now I'm sitting in the room playing this music, and there was a gentleman in the room by the name of Hiram Hicks who was managing Dr. Freeze and Spider-Man at the time, who watched me work and said he took interest. He felt that I had talent, and I just needed an opportunity. So he gave me an opportunity to go in the studio, and I wrote a song entitled Dreamin'. He submitted the song to Cassandra Mills at the label at Giant Records at the time, and they had casted a gentleman by the name of Christopher Williams, and they wanted a song for Christopher Williams to perform on the soundtrack. So I wrote the song. They connected me with Christopher Williams. This is my first big opportunity to sit in front of a console by myself. But for me, it wasn't foreign territory because growing up in the church, I was used to working with vocalists and choir rehearsals and, soloists. So it was second nature. But I didn't know the song would become a staple in R&B and black music culture. It was probably one of the biggest songs of the life of Christopher Williams, and the #1 song on the New Jack City soundtrack. So from that, it's just like everything, all the doors just started to open up at that point.
And I'm sure a lot of our listening audience remembers that
Yes.
song because I remember the song. But at this moment, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
You hear that? It's the good stuff, huh, Keith?
We gonna get to the bottom of this shit tonight.
Welcome back to our chat with Stanley Brown on the Foxworth Theory. I am Eugenia Foxworth. Stanley, you spent a number of years as a record executive in A&R at Island Records and RCA Inspiration. How much of your day-to-day activity meant seeking and developing new talent? What exactly did that entail, and who did you sign to your label?
Wow, and A&R in the 90s was a little different than it is today, where you have streaming platforms and YouTube and Facebook. We didn't have all of that. You could actually be on your way into the office, and on the A train, there's some phenomenal voice that's ringing throughout the hallways on the train, and that person would eventually end up in your office that day or the next day because they just had something special, and we would take a chance on it and invest in it. So my day-to-day was activity consisted of listening to a lot of music, a lot of song submissions from people all over the world, the nightlife, going to open mics in soul cafes, back in those days, where it just was nothing but the most incredible singers and talented people from the tri-state area and beyond. So that's where we would look. My job was to find who was potentially that next superstar, that next voice. So it was, for me, it was like waking up every day doing something that you just absolutely love doing. You know, creating opportunities for the next.
It wasn't even work.
It was never work.
Which is great.
Yeah, never work.
You were quite fortunate
Yes.
to have been mentored by Jam Master Jay and even moved into his apartment.
Yes.
Because of that friendship, you were given access to powerhouses like Russell Simmons. What did these prolific icons teach you?
Wow, Jam Master Jay, I met Jam Master Jay through his cousin, Bobby Walker, who was a drummer at a local church that I played at, that I attended. And so I met Jam Master Jay. I went to his home, and he had this studio, this home studio set up, and keyboards and drum machines. And he was like, okay, we want you to be a part of what we're doing. We started creating music together. And at that time, he lived in the Village in Manhattan, and Russell lived in the same building. So Russell would come down the stairs and come down to the apartment during the day sometimes, and it would be a room full of hip hop icons, Davey D, DMC, Run would be in the room, and so many other people. So it was just like a hangout hub for creatives. And Russell Simmons would give me an opportunity to shadow him. So at that point, at that time, he would allow me to go run the streets with him, take meetings. There was a restaurant I remember in the Village called the Pink Teacup, right? It was a really, really good soulful spot, a little tiny restaurant. But I had to be downstairs when he was ready to leave the building, or I would miss him for that day. You know, so we would, you know, he would grab his paper, we would go to the Pink Teacup, have breakfast, get in taxi cabs, and I would be able to shadow him while he would attend his business meetings. And so that developed my rhythm for wanting to be a music executive, because I wanted to be Russell.
Oh,
You know?
I love it.
And so Jam Master Jay taught me the ropes. He allowed me to stay in his apartment. It was a 1-bedroom apartment, so I was happy to sleep on the floor, which I so graciously did. You know, just give me a pillow, and then at that, you know, he had great carpet, so the carpet was nice and thick. You know, so I slept on the floor when I could, and just so in the morning, I would not miss whatever the opportunities would bring. So I just wanted to be in the room when the magic happened. So I just did what I needed to do just so I can be around it and learn from so many iconic figures.
I remember the Pink Teacup.
Yes.
The shopping was good
Yes,
around
it
there,
was.
too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, it was great. You were so fortunate.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, this concludes part one of our chat
Okay.
with record producer Stanley Brown. Tune in later this week for part 2, when Stanley shares his take on gospel music, which is the foundation of his personal music appreciation. This is the Foxworth Theory. I am Eugenia Foxworth. Thank you for watching.
You hear that? It's the good stuff, huh, Keith?
We gonna get to the bottom of this shit tonight.
Hi, this is Eugenia Foxworth. Thank you so much for tuning into the Foxworth Theory. We are celebrating going into our 3rd season. Can you believe that? We are opening our doors to sponsorships for the Foxworth Theory. For more information, go to thefoxworththeory.com or email us at PR@thefoxworththeory.com. Thank you.